All right, hello and welcome everyone. So today we are going to talk about Ivara Prime. So obviously, Ivara has not changed much going to her Prime. She's received some minor improvements, but I haven't talked about Ivara in a while, not counting what we talked about yesterday with the fairly specific intrinsics farm. So today we're going to go over some more general builds. Namely, we're going to go over what I would consider to be the normal build for Ivara, and also Sleep Ivara, which is a crowd control build. So the normal build here pretty much just focuses on having a good amount of strength so that I'm always evaporating enemies with my 4, having enough range to make my crowd control abilities viable when I need them, having max efficiency so that I'm pretty much never ever under any chances going to run out of energy, and having a solid amount of duration for those crowd control abilities as well. And this works out great. It also packs Infiltrate, so if you're doing spy missions, you're going to be able to ignore all the lasers, but mainly we're going to be getting a pretty significant speed boost out of this for our 3, so we can move around a little faster. On top of that, the only arcane that is actually vital to this is actually not Energize, but Arcane Consequence. Arcane Consequence helps Ivara a ton because this affects how far your rolls go and the speed of them. This is one of the few things in the game that does that, and Arcane Consequence is very cheap to acquire. I'll show the difference between regular rolls and rolls with Arcane Consequence active whenever we're doing the test. Energize, though, is of course extremely helpful whenever you have a gigantic energy pool like this. Having Energize really allows you to just dump this into whatever you'd like, usually your 4, and just kind of go crazy with it. Sleep Ivara is basically just an edit on the normal build. Not a whole lot of mods get switched out, but basically you dump all of your strength in favor of more duration and more range. And this build is just hard crowd control. This is useful in interception missions and any other mission really where you don't need to kill enemies. You just need to defend a thing. And it's seen less play recently, but has been important over time and is worth noting. Also worth noting on this build is I have enemy sense in here because usually whenever you're doing that like interception type farm where you just sleep all the enemies and don't let them capture the points, you need to know where they are. That's the only reason enemy sense is in here. Feel free to put a drift in here instead if you'd like power drift to make your 4 a little more viable. But yeah, of course, we're going to be showing the normal build against these enemies. And of course, worth noting is the Artemis Bow build. The Artemis Bow actually takes more forma than Ivara herself. Obviously, Ivara is only on 1 forma, but the Artemis Bow is on 3. Thankfully, Artemis Bow extremely easy to level whenever you have Ivara leveled, because it's just an extremely powerful bow that already comes with some pretty good polarities. So you're going to have no problem whatsoever leveling this thing multiple times, of course. Besides that, there's not really a whole lot to it. To go over the powers really quickly, her 1 has, of course, the 4 modes. We have the Cloak Arrow, which puts down a field that will cloak you if you stand inside of it. Sometimes useful for cloaking your allies. But usually what this ends up being used for is if you are really low on energy and you need a Xeneric bubble to regen some, this is an option for invisibility where you can still regenerate energy during it. So that's what it's used for, mainly for Ivara herself. Then we have the Dash Wire Arrow. Because in your 3 you're slowed down, this is sometimes used in missions where you need mobility or whenever you'd like to be up high and aiming down on your enemies. If you're going to bring an explosive weapon on Ivara, it's sometimes used for like a death from above type situation for that, but usually not employed. The Noise Arrow, by far the least useful of all of her arrows. It simply makes a noise when it comes out, and it has enemies walk towards it. This is usually only useful in stealth type missions where you need to group all the enemies up and you just want them standing in one spot so you can sleep them all and then not worry about them. But that comes up extremely rarely. It can be employed in the intrinsic farm that I showed off yesterday, to round up the enemies and have them walk towards you while you're doing like back assassinations, but not usually employed. Most important, definitely the Sleep Arrow. This simply puts enemies to sleep in an AoE for a decent amount of time and opens them to finishers. It also, as we discussed yesterday, resets alert states so that you can stealth farm, but not super vital. Other abilities, her 2. So her 2 is Navigator. This will allow you to fire a projectile and guide it. You can use the left click and right click to adjust speed of the projectile as you fire it. Usually, it doesn't come up. It will increase damage the longer you are navigating for the projectile that you fire, but 99% of the time, it is not going to be used. Technically there is a build where you can go much more power strength and use this to DPS for the Eidolons, but there are other Warframes that are better at that job, even though you can employ that as a strategy. Outside of that, we have her 3, which is by far her most important ability and gives Ivara most of her niche, which is stealing from enemies. Ivara is being used very heavily right now in the sentient ship farm, trying to get parts for the Shidu, and has been used across a lot of different missions over time to steal things from enemies. Because in addition to being invisibility that is simply on a drain and has no timer, you steal stuff from enemies that you are close to, which is super useful. Also, if anyone was wondering how to complete those Riven challenges where you have to do a survival without killing anyone, usually stealing the life support from them with Ivara is the path to that success, if you were wondering. And then finally, we have her Artemis Bow, which is really straightforward, I think. It's just an excellent bow that has hella multi-shot. Now, the important thing to note here is that you do not need to charge the bow to get its full damage. All charging the Artemis Bow does is change the angle at which the arrows are fired. Usually the just like straight up and down firing that you're seeing here, this is used whenever you just need to kill a single target at close range, because all of the arrows will just pepper their body from head to toe. And then the wide angle is used for firing down a hallway and hitting multiple targets. That's usually how it goes. And the only other important note about Artemis Bow is that if you alt fire with the Artemis Bow, it will fire whatever special arrow you currently have selected, so you can fire all of those at will. This is, of course, much faster than holding down your 1 key, and is also considerably more convenient than doing that too. It still costs you energy, but it is a huge convenience. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's spawn some enemies in and absolutely fucking annihilate them, because they basically they can't really respond to this. They have no choice but to die. Like they don't really get to choose here. This is pretty much just what's gonna happen. Like, this bow has absolutely no troubles whatsoever with these enemies, and like even if it did, I could fire a pretty much unlimited amount of arrows at them. Also, as you can see, my rolls are pretty far and fast because I have Consequence going, which allows me to get around quite quickly, and is definitely the best upgrade you could possibly have for Ivara, just allowing you to roll around at the speed of sound. It is also worth noting that if you do not have a set of Energize, which is her second preferred arcane, you can use 2 sets of Arcane Consequence to make yourself real fast. Also, as that is wearing off, you can now see the regular speed rolls. It is considerably faster whenever you have a Consequence up. Yeah, this absolutely annihilates these enemies, completely unsurprisingly. Ivara has no trouble doing things by herself. The only issue she ever really has is that she will do things generally a bit slower than other Warframes, but she's an incredibly good Warframe to use solo whenever you just need to get things done consistently and not necessarily at the fastest speed imaginable. But yeah, that is what's up with Ivara. It's been a long time since I've done a refresher vid on her, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will see you tomorrow.